This class will deal with inventory management. Now this is an important topic when we think of companies and think of their budgets and think of their accounts. Inventory constitutes a large element of cost for many companies. So it's important that inventory is managed properly. And in this session I want to review general ideas, some of which have been encountered in other videos and in other readings. But just let's go over these quite quickly if we can. It's also important to note here that some of the ideas that we're going to deal with are, in a sense, theoretical. These are the principles that underpin inventory management. They may not be applied strictly in every company, but they are the principles upon which inventory management may be based. So let's see how it works out. Let's start with looking at the forms of inventories that we may encounter when we deal with this topic. First of all, raw materials. Well, I suppose when we think of manufacturing companies, we normally think of raw materials. It's something that comes to mind almost immediately. We can imagine lorries delivering raw materials into the stores. Now, the raw materials are unfinished and unprocessed goods. There may be strips of metal or pieces of wood or whatever. And these are the items which will be worked upon within the company and fashioned into the final product, the product that the consumer or the customer wants. So raw materials are clearly an important element in the production process. Without raw materials, nothing will be produced. So it's important that we first of all itemize this type of inventory. But we also have maintenance, repairs, and so on. Machines may need special oils to keep them working, and it may be important that the company maintains a stock of these oils. Or certain components on the machines may wear out, so it's important that the company keeps a stock of replacement parts. It doesn't want the machine to break down and then have to go look for the parts and find the parts and get them delivered and then installed, because all the time the machine is standing idle, it's costing money. It's a wasted resource. Production has been lost and the whole company could in fact come to a standstill. Depends on how production is configured. But it also, in terms of a service-based company, they must maintain their equipment as well. If they're using computers in the office, they must make sure that the computers are running smoothly and are being maintained and up to date and so on. So we have a second type of inventory in the form of stocks held for maintenance and repairs, and the operating supplies, both the consumables in the office and what's necessary to keep the factory moving if it's a manufacturing based organization. Then we have work in progress. Sometimes companies, in order to get a smooth production, they will produce some or partly produce some items and hold those items in stock. So the machines are running constantly, the company is being efficient, but the output is not being ordered. It's just work in progress. It's items which are in a semi-finished state, and they may be held in the stores, and when orders come in the future, these items are brought back and then completed and dispatched to the customer. So work in progress is semi-finished work. It's work. Some items have some work done on them, but they are not complete, and they're held in the stores. Then, of course, we have stocks of finished goods. Stocks of finished goods, sometimes companies, in order to get smooth production, keep the machines running and so on, even though they haven't had orders, will continue to produce the products, and hold the products in the stores. When the order arrives from the customer, they can then meet the order straight from the stores. Of course, the customer will be very happy to receive such a speedy response, to get the products so fast. They haven't had to wait for them to be produced. So sometimes companies produce products and keep them waiting in anticipation of customers' orders. Now, inventory related costs. Well, first of all, we have the ordering and the setup costs. There is a cost associated with calculating and working out what items should be ordered, how much of the item should be ordered, and also, I'm anticipating the next slide, but the holding costs of the various items that are ordered, so that when deliveries arrive at the company, the stocks have to be held somewhere. They have to be held securely somewhere. So there's a holding cost. So there's an ordering cost, working out how much of the items and who the company should buy from and what discounts are available, and then setting up to receive the items, and then finally holding the items. These are all costs that have to be borne. There's also the possibility, if the buyers get it wrong, that there could be a stockout. Now, a stockout is when the company runs out of materials, so production stops. Now, that is serious because the overheads of the company will continue. Wages will still have to be paid, salaries will be paid, the overheads of the company, the utilities of the company, all have to be paid still, but nothing's been produced because the company ran out of raw materials. That's called a stockout, and that is a major source of concern in many companies. So they try to maintain stocks to avoid a shutdown of this nature. Then we have the opportunity cost. Now, this is a term often used in economics, and I think it was originally developed in economics. This is the cost of the next best alternative foregone. That is the proper definition. The cost of the next best alternative, the next best one. So, whatever we do in life on a personal level, we have opportunity costs. If you decide to be an accountant, then you can't be a solicitor or a lawyer. If you decide to be a buyer, then you will not work in marketing or you will not work in production. You'll be a buyer in the company. Now, the cost of going down one route is the route that you gave up. It's the next best one. It's the one that you were thinking of but you didn't do. So we always face opportunity costs. If we have limited money, for example, so if we buy a certain lunch today, then the lunch that we were thinking of having is really the cost of what we had. It's the one we gave up in order to get the one we had. So everything, in a sense, has got an opportunity cost. As long as we have a choice to make, we have an opportunity cost. And the company has an opportunity cost in terms of stocks. If it buys a lot of raw materials in, it's tying up money in the raw materials. That money could have been used for something else. That money could have been used to improve the machinery or increase the sales effort or the marketing effort in the business. So the cost of holding extra large amounts of stock is what is not happening. And why it's not happening is because all the money has gone into stock, let's say. So there's nothing left for marketing or for improving production or whatever. So the next best alternative is the one that is being missed out, and that's the cost. Then of course there is the cost of the goods themselves. That is a cost which must be taken into account. We measure the cost of the goods in terms of the opportunity cost, but it's worth, in this case, just simply stating it's the amount of cash that's in the stores or held up in stocks. So we can identify, well, 5 or 4 if you want to merge 4 and 5 together. We can observe these 4 or 5 points. Setting up costs, trying to work out who to buy from, who will the suppliers be, what are the discounts, when will the orders be placed. It's the administration that goes to the buying process. Then carrying or holding the costs. The stocks must be held somewhere, they must be held securely and safely. That's all cost. Stock out is when the company could close down because the company has run out of stocks. So that's a danger. And then there's the opportunity cost. It's what could have happened with the money that was tied up in excess stock. If the buyers overbuy, they're holding cash belonging to the company in stock, which could have been used for some other purpose, could have been better used for some other purpose. Now, decisions in inventory management, there's only a couple here. First of all, the first decision is when to order. It's important to know when to place the order. It's also important to know when to place the order and how long the order will take. What's the lead time on the delivery? If the company places an order today, will it take a week? If it takes a week, that's the lead time. Will there be enough stock in the company to keep it going for the week while it waits for the order to be delivered? And also, how much to order? What's the right quantity to order? And in fact, that's what we're going to calculate later in these slides. We're going to have a look to see how order quantities can be calculated in a most efficient way. Now, the types of inventory management systems. Well, we have a reorder point system. This is when the time between orders varies. So we may place an order this month and next month and then not again for 3 months. So the time between the orders varies, but we always order the same quantity. The quantities are fixed. We have periodic review systems. The time between orders is fixed, so we order every month, let's say, or every 6 months or whatever. And we vary the quantities to try and meet the demands that the company is experiencing for its product. So we place the orders on a regular basis and we vary the quantities. We also have material requirements planning, MRP, and it's dependent on demand items. It looks at what items the customers want and then tries to plan orders of raw materials and components to meet those orders. But there are other systems which we're not dealing with here. Some of them related to JIT, and that's the just-in-time system, which is very important, and the lean systems, which we haven't really talked about in this context either. And we're not going to, in fact, deal with these in this session. They belong to other videos elsewhere on the course. Now let's look at fluctuations in inventory. And often when we look at inventory material in books and in journals, we encounter this type of diagram. It's known as the sawtooth diagram because it looks like a saw's, the blade on a saw, a wood saw, let's say, and the teeth tend to have that shape at the bottom. So it's the sawtooth diagram. And if I can just put the cursor onto the screen for a moment, here we have the stock level at 2000, and over a 2-month period the stock is used up. And you can see here it's used up in a linear fashion. That's just an assumption I'm making. We're saying that the stock is used up constantly over the 2 months until it runs right out. So it's linear because it's a constant rate of stock usage. And at the end of the 2-month period, perfectly synchronized, we have an order received into the store. We have a delivery. So it shoots back up to 2000, and again it runs down over 2 months. Just at the last moment, another delivery, and it shoots up and back down. So we have this sawtooth type diagram. It's quite theoretical in a sense, because production doesn't happen in this nice linear fashion, in this linear way. There could be variation in production from one day to the next, so that nice straight line may be curved all over the place. But nonetheless, it gives us an idea of how stocks are used up and then replaced. That's all the diagram is meant to show. So it's a very straightforward diagram, very simple, straightforward to understand. Now there are priorities in inventory management, the ABC concept. The A items, well, these are very important. 15, 20% of the items that account for around 75 or 80% of annual inventory value. So these are very important items. They are the ones, there's a small number of them, but they account for a large proportion of the budget. So they are very expensive, very important items. The B items, well, as you can see, they account for more of the items in the stores but have less value, 15% or thereabouts. These are rough figures, just indications. But what we're saying is that we have A items which are very important. There's a few of them, but they're very high value. B items, we have more of them. They're not so valuable. And the C items, we have a lot of these perhaps, and they are quite cheap. So they're not perhaps that important. They're important in terms of production, but they can be replaced easily. They can be found easily. They are not specialist. They're quite cheap items. And if we look at the value on the vertical axis and the percentage of total items on the horizontal axis, we say take 20% of the total items. We can see we've got something like 75% of the value in terms of usage. Those will be the A items, and then the B items, well, it'll be somewhat less, 50% of the items and 90% there. So it's a cumulative curve, but it just indicates that not all items in the stores are of equal importance. That's the point. Now the economic order quantity, well, we need to work out how much to order, and I said this earlier in the video. We need to now work out what is the economic order quantity to try and see what orders should be placed. Well, we start with looking at the cost, which is equal to the ordering cost plus the holding cost. That is the inventory cost, the cost of ordering the item and the cost of holding the item in the stores. So slightly more sophisticated here, we have the fixed cost per order times the annual demand, the fixed cost per order times the annual demand, over the optimal order quantity. Now let's just consider this for a moment. We have an optimal order quantity. We don't know what that is yet. We're just saying there must be an ideal amount to order. Let's say the ideal amount to order is 100. So the ideal amount, the optimal order quantity is 100, let's say. Now we have the fixed cost per order. So every order will have a certain fixed cost. And we have the annual demand, whatever the annual demand is. So if we divide the annual demand by the order quantity, the optimal order quantity, we'd know how many orders to place. and the cost will be the fixed cost of the order. So if we were to divide, I'll put the cursor onto the screen again, if we were to divide the annual demand by the optimal order quantity, if we knew what that was, but if we divided that annual demand by the optimal order quantity, we'd know how many orders to place. So if the annual demand was 1,000 and the optimal order quantity was 100, we would have 10 orders. The fixed cost per order is whatever. So now we've got the ordering cost. It's fixed times annual demand over the optimal quantity. So the fixed cost, F, times the annual demand over divided by the optimal quantity. The holding cost, well, that's just the annual holding cost per unit times the optimal quantity divided by 2. Now, why is it divided by 2? Well, if we were to think about the we'll just skip back for a second to this diagram. If we think about the average quantity held here, so we take the 2,000 plus, it's run down to 0 here, plus 0. So 2,000 plus 0 is just 2,000, divided by 2, and we'll get 1,000. So on average, the company holds 1,000. So what we've got is a way of looking at the annual holding cost per unit times the optimal quantity, or how many units are actually held, the holding cost, well, it'll be the average. So the company will be holding the average quantity over a long period. So we divide by 2, just as I've done with the diagram earlier. So now we have the holding cost per unit times the optimal quantity divided by 2. Well, it's the holding cost per unit times the average quantity held. So we've got an idea of the ordering quantity, the ordering cost I should say, and the holding cost. Now if we add both together, because the top equation tells us we must add both together to get the total cost. So the total cost is just the fixed cost times the annual demand divided by the optimal order quantity, this one over here, plus this one here. It's the holding cost per unit times the optimal order quantity divided by 2. So if we now take this one here, this is the one we're going to deal with. Just remember what the F, the D, the H and the Q stand for. Just make a note of those and make sure you understand what they are. So now let's rewrite that. That's what we've got. Now we want to find out what the economic order quantity is. We want to minimize the cost with respect to the order quantity. We want to minimize the cost. Now, for those of you who have not done calculus, the following bits will look mystifying. Don't get worried. If you haven't done calculus, just skip through the following slides and we'll get to the end and accept what I've got at the end as true. But for those of you who have done calculus in mathematics, I'll show you how to get there. And it's straightforward if you have done calculus. If you haven't, you may find it somewhat difficult, but stick with me. The final couple of slides are important, and those are the ones you will need to know. So we'll start with minimizing. We need to minimize the cost, and how we do that is we partially differentiate costs with respect to quantity. And when we differentiate this part here, well, that quantity is on the denominator, it's under in the fraction. So in fact, that's to the power of -1. And when you differentiate, you will find you get that. So it's minus this, we reduce it by 1, so it's to the minus 2, plus h, well, differentiate that with respect to quantity, we just get h over 2. And in order to minimize it, we set it equal to 0. That's, again, another principle from calculus. Now, given we've got this set equal to 0, we can now take this, if you like, because it's a minus, and take it over to the other side, rewrite it, and we've got this one here. So this expression here, FD over Q squared plus H over 2, by rewriting it, because we've got a minus sign here, we can get this relationship here. And solving that for Q squared, we'll just cross multiply. We got Q squared up here, and we got H on the bottom, and the 2 comes up to the top. So that's what we've got there. And of course, to get Q, we just take the square root. So now we've got a formula for calculating the economic order quantity. It's a theoretical formula. It's often quoted in articles and in books and in chapters and so on. So it's important we should be familiar with it. But it is theoretical because, remember, we made assumptions about production being continuous over that period. And we made assumptions about the order quantities and the timings of the orders, and everything runs smoothly according to the diagram we had earlier. So, but nonetheless, if that's what we've got, and we've got twice the fixed cost associated with ordering times the annual demand over the holding cost. And the square root of that gives us the economic order quantity. It's an important little formula to know because, as I said, we do bump into it quite often when we read about inventory management. So if we look at our diagram again, we have the maximum level, say 2000. We had a 2-month period over here. We have the average of 1000, which I said is dividing this by 2. So we take the maximum quantity up here as, sorry, I'm pulling this off the slide. We take the maximum here at 2000, and we've got 1000 here. So we have a reorder level, and the reorder quantity, well, we've calculated it here, whatever that is, and we take the reorder quantity and put it in here. This little sign here stands for the lead time. So we have a lead time here. We place the order here and we receive it here. So that's the lead time. That's the time we have to wait for the order to be completed and sent by the suppliers, delivered to the stores. And over here we have a lead time again, and a lead time, and so on. The lead times are, as I said, the delivery times between placing the order and receiving the goods into the stores. So we have our inventory management. This could be anything, could be water distributing inventory graph. We have a 2-month period, and the stock of water is running out over this period. It could be water in a reservoir even, and something needs to be done. We need to pipe in water from elsewhere. We have our inventory level at a particular time period, and eventually we will have to go back to work out what we need, what the demand is going to be, what's the time period, and then try and implement the policy. So it's not just placing an order with suppliers. It could apply to many areas of the public sector as well. Let's have a look at an example. Let's say we have a given annual demand of 45,000. It's £3 per unit per year holding cost. So every item costs £3 to hold for a year. and the ordering cost is £150. Just to place the order, it costs £150 to get all the paperwork done and the time and so on. Now, if we insert this into our formula, we'd get Q is equal to 2 times 45,000 times 150 divided by 3. That's what our formula stated earlier, and you can check back on that. And if we evaluate it, we get 2,121.3. That's what we need to, that's the order we need to place. 0.3 generally we can't do, so we might round it up and we'd say 2,122, just to be on the safe side. I know under 0.5 we normally round it downwards, but in this case, because we're holding stock and we don't want the possibility of a stock out, it might be better just to round it up and say 2,122 items. That is the economic order quantity for this business. But bear in mind, it is theoretical. It's based on the assumptions we talked about. It's based on the sawtooth diagram, and that's not typical in most businesses. But the principles which we looked at here, these principles are important. So it's important to understand this class. That's all I'm going to do in this session. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.